And we are live. Really excited to welcome our guest today. Joseph Anderson is the co-founder and CEO of Connex eCommerce. They keep accounting and sales channels connected and in sync. Joe, we are so glad to have you. Really excited to hear about your story as an entrepreneur, growing your business, and also about the topic of our episode, which is how you stay mentally healthy while running and scaling a business. But before we dive into that, we'd love to hear from you. What's on your mind?
This is my first podcast, and I want to thank you. I'd like to thank you for just inviting me here. I'm competing in a public speaking competition tomorrow about a video game arcade that I used to frequent as a kid, and my mind is just on practicing my speech. I did a competition a few weeks ago. This is the third round. I won the first two.
That's awesome.
And I knew that 30 minutes before I was supposed to go, they said, you can't read your notes, so you have to memorize this. And not only that, you have to keep it within 5 to 7 minutes or you're disqualified. The good news is when I got there, I had no competitors in my group. So all I had to do was speak for 5 to 7 minutes and I won. The bad news is I had to completely memorize the speech. And so I'm just like making stuff up. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I could have maybe read a newspaper, but it was a little stressful for me. I practiced it before, but I'm always reading it on the screen when I say it. So that's very interesting time for me.
We still think you're multi-talented.
Yeah. It's kind of a metaphor, though, for starting a startup, right? It's just like there's no, you don't know what you're doing. You just kind of go for it, and it works sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit. Since I mean, that sounds like a really cool story, but I'm not going to make you do that right now. But what I would love to hear about is, I know, like when you and I met, that it was really interesting to hear about your story and how your business has sort of been, how you built your business. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how did Connex, sort of get built? Where did the idea come from, and what was your journey to build the company?
Oh, I always knew that manual data entry was a problem. My mother worked in billing data entry for about 10 years. She had me at 16, so from the ages of 16 to 26, she had a data entry job. She was our breadwinner, and she eventually got carpal tunnel from all the hand enters. She used to do like microfilm and enter stuff into a computer, and pieces of paper she would various enter. And she got carpal tunnel, later lost her job, and we had financial issues. I knew that data entry was a problem. Back in 2008 or 2009, I was working at a software company, and they had a QuickBooks data entry problem. They had an intern hand entering sales, 100 a day, and she was going crazy. So I knew that QuickBooks data entry was a problem. When I left my employer, about a year later, I met another software developer who's like, yeah, you can do data entry with QuickBooks. Here's the code. And I bought a code for $300, and I worked with it for a couple of weeks, and I was able to reverse engineer and figure it out. And I started building these QuickBooks integrations for customers. And one of my contracts, they said, hey, Joe, Intuit's launching this app store. I want to see if you can get us listed. I said, all right. I looked into it, and they said, hey, would it be cool if I could put Connex on there? I eventually went through the application review process, took a couple months, and I got listed. Product did really well, and we started just to grow. I started contacting Shopify, ShipStation, BigCommerce. And at the time, there weren't many system integrators, and app stores were just kind of getting live. And I would call them, they'd list me, and we were receiving a lot of customers. At the time, the product was only $50 a month. So the idea was a lot of users at a low amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we how we grew. At the time, e-commerce was taking off. You have a low-cost product, and there was a lot of demand. There weren't many people doing it. Not even ShipStation or Shopify had their own, and so we just signed up a lot of customers that way.
Yeah.
How did you, obviously that you were kind of making up the playbook as you went along and trying to figure out how to bring in users, but what worked? How did you bring people in to, and this is actually an interesting space, because you're doing one thing that Jeff and I are often talk about is this, like, you have to sell a lot to a lot of customers. It's a very different marketing problem than you are trying to sell to one or two B2B customers. How did you build that clientele?
One way I built it was I did a good job on customer service. All I had was a black corded phone and a laptop. I wasn't really advanced. I was working in a shabby one bedroom apartment in my living room. And I just got on the phone with customers. I called them. I troubleshooted their issues and I fixed things all day. I was just constantly making improvements. I know there are some support staff that won't get on the phone with customers, and I've had to deal with that myself. I said, let me call this customer. I said, let's take care of this on the phone. I had a support call yesterday, really short. We found actually last year that 90% of our support problems, when we emailed them, it didn't solve the issue. But when we called them on the phone, we were able to solve it faster and clear out the support tickets. So the answer was just providing really good technical support to our customers, and then leave positive reviews, and that helped on the app cards. Also just being in a space where there weren't really many competitors at the time, and being able to pick up the phone and talk to people, I think was a big part of it.
I think the issue of technical support is very acute for a lot of businesses now, because many companies are trying to cut corners on that and either offshore customer support or make it half self-service or ticket-based. Again, you first go through AI and whatnot. So truly technical support is a big deal. Do you still see it as your competitive advantage, so to speak?
Yeah, I see that as our competitive advantage, that we can call our customers and speak to them and troubleshoot issues over the phone. I don't believe in AI. We've tried chatbots. They don't work, in my opinion. We found that 80% of support cases are opened by 20% of customers, and calling those customers on the phone and saying, either we can solve it or we don't offer the functionality and you need to find something else. We've had to say that to some customers, and some of them have moved on, and our ticket support queue is cleared out over time. One reason why we had many tickets were billing issues. People couldn't cancel their accounts. They couldn't upgrade or downgrade. And when I updated the billing system from PayPal to Stripe in 2021, our support tickets dropped by 25%. You find that if you're able to solve, usually when a lot of support tickets, there's a trending issue. And if you can group the tickets by the trending issue and solve them, your volume will go down significantly.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you say that. So at one point, I used to be work at Cracker Barrel, and at one point I had the guest relations group reported into me, and we actually went the other way. We actually moved. Well, we didn't go to chatbots, but we moved to email instead of phone, because the call volume was so high that what was happening was we weren't getting to thousands of calls every week, and so it actually allowed us to just get to more calls. But I agree with your point. It's but that sort of that personalized kind of I'm here to help you, I've got a human being here, I think is really important. And it definitely we definitely had people we get frustrated with us because they couldn't get a human being. So
I feel like that it's interesting. And Jeff, Elena, we've had a couple of episodes recently where we just talking about this whole human connection. And I think what Joe's talking about here is the human connection on the other end of the sale. Is how do you keep the customer happy? How do you keep the keep that human connection going so that they want to keep buying from you? I think that's really interesting. So the title of the episode, Joe, is Staying Mentally Healthy While Running and Scaling a Business. What you just described sounds like there's a lot of high touch, with your customers. You obviously have to be building, improving, etc. How do you make sure that you strike a reasonable balance so that you don't burn out? And do you have, I don't know how big your company is, but how do you make sure that you and your team don't burn out from overwork?
I think that's a great question. With regards to technical support, making sure there's a clear process. So when you submit a support ticket, what's your account? What's the error? Steps to reproduce? When did the error start? Getting key information. Most tickets, we would get tickets maybe back in 2017, and our response was, who are you again? What's your account? And basically we would spend 3 or 4 back and forths just getting basic information about a support ticket. And so that's one way, is having a really good process where if you want to contact support, we need all this information from you. All right, now that we have this, yeah, that's a trending issue. We know about it. Call us in a day or two. So that will prevent a lot of support tickets, like quicker resolution and solving problems. I would say another way to stop burnout is having a notification system on our site. So when you log in and submit a ticket, we have a notification that says, hey, we're having downtime right now. This is a known problem. Don't open a ticket. So having a really good way of communicating to your customers that this is a system-wide issue will help. So basically preventing many of these support tickets and calls from reaching you in the first place, because many tickets and support calls are about the same issues, and trying to figure out why can't customers self-help? Why can't we tell them that the site's offline right now and we're working on it? There's no need to have 30 people tell us the same thing. I think boundaries with some customers that you need to pay for this. For example, there's a difference between tech support, like I'm getting this error code. What does it mean? Whereas implementation, can you go add Amazon for me and configure it? I'm like, well, that's a setup. That's not technical support. And we bill them for additional things, or if you want to do it yourself, here's a guide. I think, kind of drawing boundaries between what's custom software, what's technical support, having boundaries. And another thing I've seen, I was at a men's book club about a month ago, and these consultants, and they said, yeah, we take calls 24/7 and even at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I'm like, well, why would you do that? That's really weird. Why would somebody call you at 2 a.m.? He said, well, we're afraid if we don't pick up the phone, someone else will. And I said, well, couldn't you just hire an answering service to take calls off hours and to ring you if there's an emergency? And maybe you could have somebody like on call on Saturdays or Sundays to just take those important calls. I mean, you can hire someone to pick up the phone off hours. I mean, it's always a good idea. I get that people want a human-to-human connection, and even an answering service, like, okay, great, they have my inquiry, I think is helpful. I think with regards to staying healthy, also, you have to have a life outside your job. There's a lot of times where I've said no, even to prospective customers. I had one prospective customer that wanted me to do custom software for free, and I said, no, I'm sorry.
Well, that never happens.
It's a lot of time, energy, and money, and I'd love to work with you, but if you don't want to pay us for the time, so that's
learning how to say no is definitely a thing. Sorry, Elena, go ahead.
No, I was just going to build on this question and say there are some situations where you have to fire a customer. So talk to us about that and the impact or relief really on your mental health.
When you're charging $50, $50 or $100, I've had a customer, I think 3 years ago, that I had a fire, and he was, super angry and hard to deal with, but he's paying $100 a month. I'm like, well, if you let him go, I mean, what's the impact of the company financially? Not much. So you have to be polite to people that we can't do things. I'm just going to refund your month and let you go. I've done that before. I mean, it's like, you have to ask, what's the impact of the company if you let him go? And we've discontinued integrations and software, and we've lost money, but we've also been able to cut back our staff. At one point, I had 8 people in customer service and support. Now I only have 1.
Right.
We've just been able to cut. Like, you may lose revenue, but you're cutting back on people to do tech support, and that's something to consider too. In the end, for a business, it's about the profit. I mean, I'd rather have a 45% profit ratio on $1 million than have a 1% profit ratio on $2 million.
Yes, absolutely. So, Joe, while you're sort of talking about that, I don't know if you want to talk about. I know you wrote a book. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. I
can talk about finding your way to success. It's all about efficiency, getting rid of marketing tactics that don't generate revenue, sales and people and tactics that don't generate revenue. I mean, last year we spent about $300,000 on marketing and salespeople and tactics that didn't generate money. And this year I said, we're not going to do trade shows. I told the salespeople that this isn't working out, and we've saved a lot of money, and I have a lot more free time.
Right.
Even myself, like, I'm probably working about half the hours now that I worked the previous year, and I have time to work on a new business idea and new product ideas.
Yeah. What are the biggest mistakes that you see other entrepreneurs making as they're building their businesses?
Well, I see a lot of mistakes. I think, one, that they need to have a life outside their job. Friends and family are important. I think there are too many hours, too much work. The best business advice I received was from a man named Patrick Hines, and he said, "Joe, is it worth your time?" This is back in 2010. I was at a code camp for software developers,
Mhm.
and I wanted to build software for the Windows Phone, which didn't work out. It was supposed to be a competitor to Android. A great phone, but
Yeah.
I'm there and I'm like, Patrick, he's a speaker there. I want to build apps for mobile phones. What do you think of my idea of Windows Phone? And it had like 1% market share.
Right.
And the idea is, before you work really hard, what's the demand for this?
Right.
And it's
Right.
always good to just like, let's do like a minimum viable product, and let's just kind of see if there's demand. And if there's nobody buys it, well, I didn't put in a lot of time and money. I think part of business is you got to try a lot of different things. Even when I had Connex before I did the QuickBooks, I actually had another integration for Great Plains, which is another accounting
Yep.
system, running side by side. And that one I turned off. And I built most of the product ideas I built have failed spectacularly, and only a handful of them have really worked, and they've really been a slam dunk. So I think business owners, they have to like have a couple little products and ideas going, and then the ones that work you keep, and the ones that don't you kind of turn off. So knowing when to move on with a product idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Joe, you said before, like, you backed off on the trade shows and changed your approach this year in order to increase that work-life balance. What are some of the things that you're doing instead of those trade shows? And maybe you said this already, but I wanted to hear
Yeah,
more.
we're focusing more on partnerships. We're working on partnerships with other tech companies, reaching out through our network or people that we've met. So that's been successful. Reaching out to existing customers, account management. How are you doing? We've also been working on some customers have been using the wrong plan levels. So we've been working on getting them onto higher or lower plans based on their usage. So trying to keep existing customers happy, as well as make sure we're charging them for all the features that we're using. So that's been helpful. Getting customers into annual plans instead of monthly to help them save money, and just keep working on customer retention and working on getting referrals, especially from existing customers. We also run our own business networking group, so that's been successful, trying to generate revenue in other ways other than Connex, or things that we've doing. I think trade shows. The problem with trade shows is that you only meet the person once, and it's a short-term interaction. Whereas with a networking event, you keep seeing the same people over and over again. Like even Jeff, I think I'd seen you 3 or 4 times before you come to my networking event. I've probably met with you 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
And then when you get that level of comfort, then you're open to referring and doing business. Like you need multiple touches with the same person. It's really hard to do that with trade show attendees, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Plus, they're far away and they're just super expensive.
Yeah. So yeah, I've always thought they were high cost, but I know what you mean. And I always talk about the sort of first date phenomenon where you're like, when you're in front of somebody, you're talking to them like, yeah, you're my best friend. And as soon as you walk away, and after you've talked to 16 other people at the same trade show, like they're not your best friend anymore. You don't even remember who they are. So it feels like, I feel like you can gain the sense at a trade show that you are making more progress than you actually are in generating sort of trusted leads.
Yeah, I mean, we received several hundred leads, but we weren't able to close any of them. Most of the people ghosted us.
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
really,
I've seen that happen with some of of Jeff and my clients. The same kind of thing.
Really, with marketing, I found you want to be in the room with people who are looking for a solution to a problem you can solve. So it connects. Let's say I want a bunch of ShipStation customers. I want to sync with QuickBooks Enterprise. I want to be in the room with those kinds of people that are like, hey, we need a syncing tool, or wholesalers, can you help us? And that's what you want. And the problem with some of the trade shows we attended was the people were there we went to one, an accounting show in June, and the accountants were there to learn about accounting. They weren't there to buy Connex, and it became difficult for us to find customers.
Right.
Even though there's a lot of attendees, it's really hard to, we're not in the room with the kind of the target customer. And so that became challenging.
Yeah, I think, to that point, I mean, I think what you're getting at is something that I think is really true about business development. And Eric and I certainly talk about this a lot, is this idea of like, in the end of the day, all the currency of business, maybe even more so than money, is trust. And you can't build trust with somebody that you just meet in this sort of fleeting moment, right? Because they're just they're just passing by. You didn't really get to know them. I think that's exactly right. And I agree with you. I think, it's interesting. It's like a balance, right? You need to be going to networking events where you know people and are building those relationships, but you also need to, kind of, from time to time be going off to new ones and creating those, new connections that make.
Yeah, I'll tell you about my networking event. I was at a Chamber of Commerce event, I think in January of this year, and I was handing out flyers, and I was handing a flyer to one guy, gentleman, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've been to your event, and I didn't find any leads." And I'm like, "Well, okay." And I went to your event once, and it didn't work out for me. I think to myself, but if you keep going to these events and meeting, getting to know people, like they'll eventually know,
Yes.
like, and trust you. It's really hard to close a sale with someone that you don't know. I mean, even like, think about it. Like, if you're going to give a referral, like, who is this guy? What if it doesn't work out? Is it going to blow up in my face? And you have to kind of get that camaraderie and that trust. And what I don't like about trade shows is they're wicked far away, and it's hard to like keep touching and seeing these people over and over. But
Yeah.
you need like that kind of friendship with people. And
Well, also at the trade shows, sometimes you have representation from the company, but not the decision maker. And the decision maker is far away. And even if you met somebody from a given company, the path to the decision maker is long.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
uh,
All right. Well, so we've gotten to the point in the show where ChatGPT likes to ask questions. This sometimes I use different. Last week I think we had DeepSeek on. I don't know, whatever. But I usually ask the question: would you like an absurd question? I give two questions. Would you like absurd first or thought-provoking first? Unfortunately, this week it only gave me absurd, so you can tell me whichever one you want. But I'm probably going to start with absurd.
Sure.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right. The first one was it asks. This is not my question. Just give I'm just reading.
This must be really bad.
It's pretty bad. It says, if QuickBooks were a person, would you marry it, fire it, or send it to therapy?
I'd probably say send it to therapy. QuickBooks and I have it has a lot of error codes. It doesn't communicate very well with people. People like to call me the QuickBooks whisperer. Like, I know what the error codes mean because I've been dealing with them for a while. But it's very picky. It's moody. Sometimes it doesn't want to take your orders. It's just I'd probably say therapy. Let's talk about your feelings, QuickBooks. What happened? There's too many orders. It's not organized right. I'm like, okay, let's work it out, QuickBooks.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. The other one was, I don't know. I still think this is probably in the absurd category, but do you dream in spreadsheets, or is that just a side effect of being a CEO?
I don't really use spreadsheets that much. I mean, I have I would say I don't use spreadsheets very often. I don't dream in them, but I would think many CEOs use the spreadsheets.
It hasn't happened to me in a long time, but I used to have these like sort of recurring like anxiety dreams where I was, back when I used to use spreadsheets a lot, where I would like wake up in the morning and be like, oh my God, I was trying to figure out some kind of formula issue in an Excel spreadsheet that was not real.
Wow, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Well, AI is nowadays because AI can write all kinds of good spreadsheet macros. I used to write them YouTube tutorial with a stop button, and then I write and move and write. Now you just ask ChatGPT.
Well, speaking of that, how has AI changed your business in any sort of meaningful way in the last year?
I've never actually used ChatGPT.
Oh, really?
I've never found a need to. Even with code, I've seen developers use it. I just Google stuff and I get on old stackoverflow.com, and I have an old style way of doing things.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't really use AI. I'm not a fan of computers auto-generating things like that. A little more old-fashioned.
Got it.
Even with tech support, I don't believe in AI doing things. I believe more in, like, if you have a good user interface and your help center is pretty well organized, if your software is set up in a way of people that can self-help and you train your customers right, you shouldn't need to automate so much, in my opinion.
Interesting. What does your team use AI in any ways? Not really.
None to my knowledge.
They haven't told you.
And if you
Maybe
did
some of my
know,
team is AI. I don't know. I have some developers overseas that work for me. Maybe they are ChatGPT AI. I don't know.
So what going back to earlier part of the conversation, you were talking about, sort of keeping the balance and keeping things from affecting your work-life balance. One of the story came up in my mind. My son was he's 15, but he's going to be 16 soon. He's looking for a driving school to do his his hours and his learner's permit, etc. And of course, him being like a kid, he's much more used to I know that I would not have checked up on the reviews of a company when I was 15, but of course he knows. You go online, you check the reviews or whatever, and he's like, I don't want to go to this particular driving school because the owner of the driving school is on there. He didn't use the word crap, but crap posting people who are giving him negative reviews. And, in other words, like he was taking these reviews super personally, and there's sort of like a lack of ability to sort of separate himself from, his anger from his business. Is that something that you, have come across? Have you,
Yeah, you can't make everybody happy. I used to be really afraid of anger reviews, and I had a listing on the Shopify App Store, and we had a couple of bad reviews, and we were fine. Some of the people who left bad reviews, we call them and talk to them. They actually turn them into 5-star reviews. So sometimes just talking about their feelings has helped too.
Yeah, I think that is something that I certainly learned in my restaurant days. Like if you make something right, you can often take a bad situation and turn it into like an advocate kind of situation. But I think Eric, what you're talking about is exactly right. Like you can't. So much of business is like how do you stop yourself from having that emotional reaction, right? Like this feedback is actually an opportunity for me to learn as opposed to a reason for me to get ticked off at this, this customer or whatever. So
it's kind of like that meme that you sent me years ago, Jeff, the turning FU into okay, great.
Yeah. That's this meme is how it was something like how to be an adult at work, turn FU into okay, great. So, but I think that's even more true with your customers is like, how do you, and it's not, to your point, Joe, it's not like you always have to deliver, whatever they ask for. Sometimes they're just going to be peeves, but you have to kind of remain calm at all times. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading Let Them, a book by I think Mel Robertson, and one of the things she said was 90 seconds. Like, just all right, before I see this, I'm just gonna pause for 90 seconds. I'm gonna take a deep breath. Let me just, before I do anything, and let the feeling kind of pass. I think many of these guys, just calling a lot of them and talking about their feelings, many of them pulled them down about the reviews. I'm like, all right, well, let me have someone third party, like a salesperson, someone who doesn't know them, talk to them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I was getting into Jeff, trying to ask a question. Aside from just reverting and having personal conversations with the entities that left a bad review, what else do you do to try to manage the online reputation?
Do you mean like on LinkedIn posting there, like
negative? No. If you received a negative review, what else can you do?
Respond to it. Try to cover it up with positive reviews. We ask people for reviews frequently, like, hey, can you comment? Hey, can you leave? We have a support call. I'd be like, hey, well, I have you. Can you leave a review and kind of cover it up has also helped.
Yeah, an interesting story came up yesterday. Actually, a client of Twinning Edge, Jeff and my company, they had put something out on LinkedIn. They're a scientific company, and somebody basically said the science is terrible, it doesn't work, blah blah blah. And I said, and he asked me, should I respond to it? Should I, again, crap post, blow this up? And I was like, you have both an opportunity and a danger here, right? You have an opportunity to show that you care about what this person is complaining about. Potentially, as you said, I suggested, why don't you try to set up a call with this guy? But but ultimately, I was like, you've got to be nice, and you can use it, particularly on LinkedIn where everything is connected. And if you respond, it might go to a lot more people. It's like, what's the way to turn this around so you can say, yeah, we understand that there are these limitations. This is why our product does X, Y, Z. In other words, is there a way that you can actually use this as a positive in your advertising?
Well, so Joe, we are, as promised, this half hour has flown by, but before we go into our sort of final sequence where we ask everybody to sort of give a sense of, what's one thing to take away. I know you've got an event coming up soon, so I don't know if you wanted to talk about
Yes,
that.
I'm hosting a business networking event on March 31st. It's going to be a Monday, and I'm going to give a talk about how to generate referrals from your business. There, we have a lot of people registered. I'm very excited. It's going to be for free food, as well as it's a ticket, and it includes a meal. I get the best people to get referrals are your existing customers. Asking them, and it's surprisingly asking those customers to upgrade, because we have customers that buy us for, let's say, one selling channel, and then they're using a competitor. I'm like, well, you could just add more channels to us. And that's one way you can surprisingly, most companies don't realize that existing customers can and will pay more money. And that's why Connex has been so successful, is just working with existing customers to upsell and keep them on the service.
Yeah.
And that's part of getting those referrals, as referring existing business. Yeah, actually, I need more from you. And also discuss getting referrals from existing customers to someone else are your best, because your existing customers already know, like, and trust you.
Right.
And then kind of going down the list, like, who are my best referrers, and then ones that maybe aren't such a good referral. I'm like trade shows, you don't really know those people, and it's hard to generate a referral from someone there. But the more someone knows, like, and trust you, the more likely they are to refer to you over time.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. So let's kick this off. We like to go around, as we told you before the show. We like to go around and ask everybody to leave the audience with one thing, and we always start with the guest. It's a mean thing that we do to our guests, so you have no time to think about it. So we'll give you your the first go around. What was one thing you'd like to leave the audience with?
Leaving the audience with, I'm not sure I understand.
No, just what's one thought from the show, or one thought that you didn't talk about? What's one thing that our audience might, at the end of the show, what's one thing you want to say? One last thought, essentially.
I think that businesses, especially in SaaS, need to focus more on keeping existing customers happy and maintaining what they have, instead of trying to find new customers. When I first started Connex, we had a 50% attrition rate, where one year we signed up 1,200 accounts, but we lost 600 of them. And I think businesses need to focus more on signing up high lifetime value, long-term accounts, instead of people that are just going to leave in 2 or 3 months. It's great to have a lot of users, but if they're not paying you any money, it's not about users, it's about profit and revenue.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great point. Before I jump in with my one thing, Joe, what's the best place for people to reach you?
LinkedIn would be best. You can add me on there.
And I'll just pop that up on the screen for a minute or two. So I guess for me, my one thing would be, I'm going to build on what you were just saying, Joe. I think that, really in the end of the day, it's, business is all about trust, building relationships, whether that's building relationships with network and referral partners, or building relationships with your clients or customers. But you have to build that relationship, and you have to make sure that relationship is working for you. And so I think, I think that's a really important and powerful message. And I will pass it over to Elena.
Thank you. I definitely am in the same camp, that your current customers are the best source of business. And at the same time, I really liked your point that you have to strike a balance between keeping the customer happy and serviced and supported, and at the same time, keep yourself and your team sane so you can continue building your business. So that hit home.
Yeah, I think businesses need to focus on why are we getting so many support tickets? Why are these customers angry, and trying to solve the problem instead of
Yeah.
just perpetuating the support
Yeah.
issues.
Well, and that was my one thing that I wanted to bring up, and that you just scooped me on, but was the concept of, and you mentioned this in a couple of different ways, which is changing the process. You talked about like changing the way you did your tickets or whatever it is. Like changing the process can sometimes change a lot of the sort of overhead that you're spending, and that coming up with really strong ways to make sure that you're not getting those tickets in the first place is a great way to
Yeah.
so you keep
I mean, our
saying,
support ticket. At one point, we had 2,000 inquiries coming in a month. Now we're probably getting maybe less than 50.
Wow.
that's fantastic. We might, when we get to that level, that next level in our company, we'll ask you how to make that
Yeah, I
shift.
mean, my next business, I'm hoping to work with tech companies to, reduce their support volume and offer
Yeah.
a better customer service support
Yeah.
experience. I'm better at operations. I think there's many companies out there that say this is how you increase your sales, improve your marketing, but I'm more of how do we make this company more operationally
Yeah.
efficient and profitable? How do we get more out of what we have?
Well, that's great. Well, we look forward to hearing about that and more about Connex. And thank you so much, Joe, for joining us on the podcast today.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.